In a world filled with information, where do you turn to get straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Lock it in to the longest-running financial talk show in Arkansas, and let us help you build the bridge between information and application. Real financial change begins right here, and it starts with you.
It's showtime! Woo!
Summertime means movie time. So hot outside, it's fun to go inside, enjoy the AC, and enjoy the latest blockbuster. Well, for the past few years, we've joined in on the fun. It's the return of Jen Welth's At the Movies.
This is the Get Ready for the Future show.
It's round 2. Last week, we talked about Top Gun and the financial lessons that we can learn from that movie. Another blockbuster on tap today. We'll give you a little line from the movie and see if you can figure it out. Yippie-ki-yay. I'm not going to say the rest, though.
You know the rest.
You know the rest, right?
Yeah.
Scott Inman along with John Shrewsbury and Troy Johnson having fun during the summer a little bit with all the market turmoil that's been going on. And we've obviously had our finger on the pulse of that for all of 2022, talking about current events, the economy, the markets. And we'll do that in this show. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes it's fun to have a little break. Just get away from it. As the summer kind of gets close to winding down, it's going to be back to school time before you know it. We're going to look at the movies out there that can maybe give us a financial lesson. And look, we may have to stretch on some of these. There's no question about it. Today we're going to talk about Die Hard. Yep, there are financial lessons from Die Hard. And we did Top Gun last week, and they have a new Top Gun movie out. So I had actually gone back and watched the old one before I went to go watch the new one. So that one was a little fresher on my mind. I'm going to lean on Troy Johnson today on Die Hard because I haven't seen this movie in quite some time. Remember it from the 80s, but Troy he was doing his show prep as any good advisor would do and sat down and took a little time, we'll say a lot of time, to watch the movie.
I'm not sure Troy was born when Die Hard was out.
I wasn't born.
Wow.
I looked it up. It came out in 88. I was born in 92.
There you go.
But yes, it took me 3.5 hours to watch this 2-hour movie last night because our internet was being a little slow.
He's got cheap internet at
got
his
a lot
house.
of buffering.
Yeah.
See, Die Hard and buffering don't really go together. I mean, you need to get that.
Right when there would be a huge action scene, it was just like, nope, here comes the spinning wheel of doom.
Yeah, I'm just talking from a technology standpoint. When I hear Die Hard, I think VHS tape. Now streaming that movie, you got to find a VCR to watch that sucker.
Wow, VCR. Is there any such thing anymore?
Oh, I'm sure that they're vintage,
So here's the central question to the whole Die Hard theme today. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
No.
Yes.
I knew this was a debate before I watched the movie, so I went into it with that mind frame, and no.
Yes, it is. It has
make
a
your
Christmas.
case.
It happens during Christmas. The guy is showing up in L.A. To see his family at Christmas, and there's Christmas ornaments all over the office building and everything. It has a Christmas, and it plays, Let It Snow or something like that.
While everybody's bleeding.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's a Christmas movie.
Well, here's my case against that. Now, I'm a tad black and white with the way I think, okay?
We know.
So, for a Christmas movie to be a Christmas movie, it is a genre, right? You put it in the same places as other types of movies. So is Die Hard a movie about Christmas? Because that would make it a genre Christmas movie. No, it's an action movie. That's the genre that it belongs in. I don't think anybody can really question that. It just happens to take place at Christmas. Troy, back me up here.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think you could have taken the Christmas aspect out of it.
It's the same movie.
It wouldn't have changed the movie at all.
Okay, all right. We need to move on because, number one, I'm outnumbered, so we need to move on because I can't win the argument. But also, we need to move on because we need to really actually impart some financial wisdom during this show.
So if they'd had Easter eggs instead of snow, it would have been an Easter movie?
Just stop. Come on now.
Okay, well, we'll leave that debate for you to decide. But we're going to talk about some different plot moments in Die Hard that actually can point us to some financial lessons. We talked about this last week with Top Gun, that pastors are very fond of doing sermons during the summer about spiritual lessons that can be gleaned from movies, and we're going to do the same here. Look for financial lessons and hopefully give you some motivation to stick to a financial plan, or if you don't have a financial plan, to find one, to get one, to work with an advisor and do that. So early in the movie, we remember Hans, right? Hans Gruber, That guy just died a couple of years ago, too.
Yeah.
He was a great actor.
He was a great villain.
Yeah, he was a good villain. He was in all the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen many of those. I sat down and watched those with my kid, but I can't remember his name. I think it's Alan was his name. But anyway, Hans Gruber is the character. Alan Rickman, thank you, Casey. He knows his actors. He was the main villain in the movie, and he's the one that infamously was at the brunt end of Bruce Willis saying yippie-ki-yay too, right?
Yep.
About it, time for his death. But before the movie really gets going, he has this quote, because obviously the Die Hard movie is about this big crime that's going to happen in a high-rise building. And he says, when they touch down, we'll blow the roof. They'll spend a month sifting through the rubble, and by the time they figure out what went wrong, we'll be sitting on a beach earning 20%.
Isn't that the dream of everybody? Sitting on the beach earning 20%?
Fast cash, big, quick, lottery-style payoff. That's what we all want, right? I mean, when we think about our retirement, and some of this is probably generated from the standpoint of we haven't really done what we needed to do along the way, and we're trying to play catch-up. That's probably some of it. But some people just are really bent on in fact, we've quoted the studies on this show that say some people think their best retirement plan is to buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah. And when you think about this whole issue of risk, through the years I've seen this really play itself out. Everybody is an aggressive investor until they're not.
Right. This year would be one of those times.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, and then when fear takes hold, then you've got a problem. And obviously that was what Hans Gruber was trying to elicit here was, some fear and, obviously a lot of calamity and what have you.
Shock and awe.
Yes, shock and awe while he is on the beach earning 20%. But I thought it was interesting. We did a little bit of research on this whole issue of risk assessment and fear and all that type of thing. A behavioral economist, George Lowenstein, says fear causes us to slam on the brakes instead of steering into the skid, immobilizes as we have greatest need for strength. And I think that's really very much apropos in this particular period of time. You can't get immobilized when you need to actually, hang on and take action and stay with it.
Yeah, these are the times when you really need to stick to your plan, not necessarily make a lot of changes to your plan, maybe make some minor tweaks. But if you've already got the plan in place that anticipates these times in the market happening, then you're in a better situation than someone that has no plan at all.
And Scott, I think, when you think about this and you think about that line from Die Hard of on the beach earning 20%, you have a lot of people come in from time to time that have heard of some sort of a get-rich-quick scheme, and that's what I would call it. This guy over here earned 40% in this deal or whatever, and they want some of that. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the way to build wealth long term. Are there some very isolated incidents where somebody hit a stock at just the right time and it took off? Yes, that is true. But if the other people who follow along behind that guy buy that same stock, they're likely not to have the same experience.
Yeah, we've often talked about how emotional the markets are. And so you can do all the research in the world, which most people don't do when they want to go through a get-rich-quick scheme. They want to just basically pull the trigger, make the buy, and let it ride. But even if you do all your homework and all your research on a company and you decide that's the stock you want to buy and that's the stock that should take off, it doesn't mean that it's going to, especially in depressed times like we're in now in the market. But that this fear mindset really, I think, plays on two sides. I think the fear of not having enough time to have a diversified portfolio, a consistent contribution to that portfolio, and watch it grow over time to someday reach your retirement date, which is the way a plan should work. The fear of not having the time to do that causes someone to take too much risk and try to look for that 20% or that 40% or that secret investment, the unicorn investment, as Janet is fond of saying. But on the other end of that, when it doesn't pan out, you pull the ripcord pretty quickly, right? Because it's going to go down at a faster pace than a diversified portfolio.
Well, we saw this all happen and play out in the cryptocurrency markets.
Yeah.
You know, crypto was going through the roof, and then all of a sudden we hit a little bump in the economy, and all of a sudden it just goes down like a rock. And a lot of people just bailed out of it, and maybe got some of their money out, and maybe still had some gains. Some people lost some money because they got in at the top, or whatever the case may be. But I think the one of the things that you've got to look out for are what are the characteristics of these things that will kind of suck you in, and it could be a get rich quick scheme. And I think one of the things that you got to look out for is that it can be too good to be true. And when things are too good to be true, you probably ought to steer clear.
Yeah, and we all inherently know when something sounds too good to be true. But obviously, these get rich quick schemes, they work. I mean, people fall for them.
Right.
But you need to take a step back and just say, does this sound truly too good to be true? If it is, you probably need to ask some more questions.
Here's one that I love it when they do this. There's a secret that nobody knows.
Yeah.
In this information age, is there anything that is a secret? Is
No.
there anything out there that is a secret? And if it is a secret, why are you trying to tell me about it? Why don't you just get rich on your own?
Right.
Do it. You know, that's kind of my thought process about that.
Yeah. The secret usually is pay me to tell you what that secret is.
Yeah.
And that is how I'm going to get rich, because I am going to sell you my secrets through either some newsletter or a book or whatever the case may be. And that is the way they hook you with that. They do sometimes with those secret investments promise high reward with low risk. Let me tell you something. You got 3 advisors at the table on this show. That is not possible.
It doesn't work.
If you are going to seek high reward, there is going to be an appropriate amount of risk that comes alongside it. If you want to eliminate risk, there is not going to be a high reward.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter, Scott, is that you can't eliminate risk.
Yeah,
there is no
that's right.
way to eliminate risk, because the minute you give up a risk of market volatility, you run into a risk of what? Inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And that
a
and
very
we're seeing-
real risk right now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we're seeing that right now. And clearly that is something that a lot of people don't really think about. But there is a risk-reward relationship in any investment. And you've got to understand that if there is not some risk, then there's likely not to be any real big payoff.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, too, that some people do need to eliminate risk with a portion of their money. Like, I don't want to give the impression here that you should have risk on with all of your dollars, right? So it's a great point to point out that the powder dry side of this, right? So if you are saving for retirement, you do need an emergency fund, and that emergency fund doesn't need to be in the stock market. I've actually had some clients that we've talked through that, like they had a brokerage account and they invested in stock, and that was actually their savings account, that when they wanted to go dip into something to go on a trip, or if it wasn't a true emergency and they had to replace an air conditioning unit or something, they were going to actually tap that brokerage account. Well, think about that. If you had that and you had $100,000 in it at the first of this year, and it was all invested in equities, you've now got about 80 probably, right? So you don't want to put your money that you might need near term in any kind of risk. And the same goes, guys, for retirement income. For the way we plan in our retirement income plan, there's about 6 to 12 months of cash built up there, so the monthly income is set no matter what happens in the market.
Yeah, you've got to have stages of it. I think a lot of times about it, sort of like I think about one of my favorite places, which is the beach, you know, and I love going to San Diego. San Diego is the home of our broker-dealer, LPO Financial, and I go out there periodically to have meetings and what have you, and I will, my favorite spot out there is Coronado Island. And you think about on one side, if you know the geography very much, on one side is San Diego Bay, on the other side is the Pacific Ocean. And, you know, if you're in San Diego Bay, you're not subject to the waves of the Pacific Ocean. It's pretty calm in San Diego Bay most of the time. Although I have been out there when the wind was up and it is kind of choppy, but you need that calm water as you approach the shore, else you're going to have a problem with your boat. And so it's much the same way in retirement. If you don't have that calm water of that first couple of segments of your retirement income plan, Troy, you can be in real trouble in times like these.
Right. That's what provides you your income. You don't have to worry about it. If you've got that 6 to 12 months, like Scott mentioned, in cash, you don't have to worry about when the markets are down like they are now. Going back to our get-rich-quick scheme, another characteristic of that is that people would encourage you to put all of your money into just one product.
Yeah.
And that can be a warning sign as well.
And this is played out in, you may not talk to these people personally. I think about any advertisement that you see on television, on radio, on your phone that tells you this is what you need. Think about the process that's happening there. They are paying to put that in front of you and tell you that this is the investment you need, and they know nothing about you. And by the way, that message is going out to thousands and thousands of people who are not the same as you. So to say that you need a specific investment when someone knows nothing about you, and to broadcast that message to thousands of people saying they all need that specific investment, that's the alarm bell that I would say you got to run from that.
You don't have to be an advisor very long before you get a call from one of your clients that says, do I need to be investing in gold? I see all this.
I've had it several times.
This happened to me. I had a client who actually saw an ad on TV for purchasing gold. Like Scott said, that ad goes out to anyone that's watching TV. She got curious and she called in. Before she knew it, she was on the phone with a gold broker, and all she wanted was a little more information. They actually did a conference call to our office. I took that phone call, and he was trying to, without her even really knowing what was going on, trying to transfer her assets that she had at LPL over to them to purchase gold with it. And finally, I said, Miss So-and-so, is this what you're trying to do? And she said, no, I was just asking for more information. And he said, we needed to call you.
Yeah.
So,
that's very, very typical. And if you've got gold and it's a great investment, why don't you hang on to it and instead of trying to sell me the gold that you have? I really am not sure how that makes a whole lot of sense. And so it is really one of those things, Scott, and gold, there's nothing wrong with a gold investment. If you want a speculative investment that is in a precious metal, I'm not bashing gold as an investment.
But understand what it is.
Yes, you understand what it is. But what I am bashing is this blatant, just absolute blanket, everybody ought to be investing in this one thing. None of your money needs to be invested all in just one thing. That's ludicrous from just even a prudence standpoint. But there's, in the wild west of some investment firms, they don't have the scruples to discern the difference.
But the other thing too is, and I would totally agree with you, if someone wants some gold as part of their portfolio, that's fine. But they need to understand, because it's sold as a safe investment, an investment that cannot go to zero, and it's always going to have value. For millennial, it has, and it has had value, but that price goes up and down. It is volatile as well, just like the stock market.
It's one of the more volatile investments out there. And there's the line on the advertisement that I love. It is, gold has never gone to zero.
Yeah.
Well, neither has the S&P 500.
That's right.
And neither has any other index. It just doesn't happen. And so it plays on fear and all of that. But back to the movie for a second. It wasn't gold that Hans Gruber was after. It was something called a bearer bond.
Yes. Remember that?
And yes. And so let's talk about that for just a second. What is a bearer bond? It really is an unregistered security. And the fact that you are bearing that, holding it in your hand, says that you are entitled to the interest of that bond, and you have ownership evidenced solely by the fact that you hang on to it. Possession is, in that case, is not 9/10 of the law; it's 10/10 of the law.
Yeah,
and so
ownership.
Yeah, but bearer bonds was the big investment that Hans Gruber was trying to get his hands on.
Yeah, and he was committed to it. There was no question about that. He had a plan, and he stuck to it, and that's what made him so difficult to overcome. Everything he did and didn't do was to accomplish his goal of taking the bearer bonds. His plan allowed him to be level-headed amid stressful situations. We're not in any way endorsing that you be Hans Gruber and go try to steal some bearer bonds.
No.
However, he was committed to that plan, and no matter what obstacle he faced, which was in the form of John McClane, the protagonist in this movie, he did not flinch. When the first member of the terrorist team was found dead at the hands of John McClane, the others panicked. And they asked Hans, what are we going to do? And his response, we are going to tell his brother. And then he went back to checking on the status of the cracking the vault codes. He was cool-headed and decisive at almost every turn. You are go back to that saying that we say that I'm not even really sure who honestly said it. It gets attributed to Mike Tyson. I think it was probably Joe Louis. One of these boxers in the history of boxing said everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And this is what's happening here in the movie.
Yeah, and clearly we've taken a punch in the mouth from the market in the last 6 months. The question becomes, do you stick to your plan? Do you have a cool, level head, or do you get emotional about it? Emotion never really gives you any kind of positive outcome. If you stop and just evaluate, okay, this has happened, let me assess the facts, and then let me calculate what my move is going forward, as opposed to being emotional about it and trying to react to something that's already happened.
There's another part in the movie where Hans and some of his gang, they're looking out the window of the high rise and they see that all of the cops are starting to show up, and the other guys are basically saying, well, what are we going to do now? And he's just as calm as can be. He says, well, we knew this was going to happen, that we planned for this. It's just like with the market and your retirement plan. We knew this was going to happen. We didn't know when, but we know markets go up and we know they go down. Yeah. And to Hans' point here, it was basically, we're going to stick to our plan. We're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Yep.
You got to roll on. And when the markets do deal you whatever, if you've planned for it, then you have your strategy already in place. He never deviated from his mission. He just didn't count on the tenacity of John McClane.
Well, and here's what we need. The point we need to make for investors is, how do you do that? It's easy for us to say on the radio, you just stick to your plan no matter what happens. Yeah, but I'm looking at my statement, right? And it's down from January of 22. It's down from May of 2022. And is it going to go back up? Well, you have to have the mentality that everything that is in your equity bucket, every stock you have invested in, should be considered a long-term investment. Back to our point about the emergency fund, if you invested those dollars in the stock market and you needed to turn around and use them in 6 to 8 to 12 to 18 months, you probably shouldn't have done it. The equity investments need to be built for at least a 10-year time horizon. So if you think about that, and you can remember that in the middle of this 6-month storm, which might be a 12-month storm, which might be an 18-month storm, but never in the history of the stock market has it been more than a 10-year storm. We've not had losses over a 15-year stretch in the S&P 500. Time tends to heal most, if not all, wounds in the stock market.
Yeah, and I think the thing that some people at least need to kind of get a grip on is the fact that as we roll into a stock market situation like we've had in the first half of 2022, if you're looking for somebody to try to pick their way out of this and get good returns regardless of what's going on in the market, that's just not going to happen. That's not something that we're going to be able to do, nor is anybody else going to be able to do that. And if they tell you that they can do that, then they're probably not telling you the truth. I think that, Troy, it is all the difference between a strategic approach at something and a tactical approach, because oftentimes tactics fail.
Yeah, and part of that strategy or strategic approach is, like we've hinted on here a few times in the show already, is just making sure you have that buffer, that early retirement money that you can use that is not going to be as affected by the stock market going way up and way down. Mm-hmm. And then you take those longer term equity investments and you push them out. That's money that you're going to use later on down the road in retirement. And if you know that I don't need that money for 15 plus years, then when we're in a year like we are right now where the market is down, it's not as big of a deal. You still own all the shares that you owned before. They're just down in value. Right. And we know that, at least looking back historically, if we give it time, that should come back up for us.
Scott, I think another aspect of this is there's an element of overconfidence that is in some of this. That's actually played out where you see one of the characters in the movie, Harry Ellis. He thinks he's going to be able to negotiate with Hans Gruber. He's like, I'll reason with this guy, and I think that's a dangerous position to be in as an investor or as a client of a financial advisor. If your financial advisor thinks he can invest his way out of a bad market, that's probably not the case. So you probably want to be still and just allow things to play themselves out instead of zigging when you should have zagged, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point when you talk about conversations we're having with our clients. If you don't have that plan like we have at Gen Wealth to refer back to, that's gold right now, to use, since we were talking about gold earlier. But when a client is rightfully concerned about their account values and we're having meetings with them and talking through the plan, and we redirect the conversation back to the plan and they understand the why behind what we're doing and how the plan is still working, even in a market that has dropped 20% year to date, that changes their mindset. But if you don't have that plan, if you've got an advisor who is just managing your investments and that's all the only leg they have to stand on, it is going to be very difficult for a client not to try to negotiate. And what's that look like? Make a change, do something, right?
Yeah.
And the advisor you've hired should be there to keep you on track towards your financial goals and not, as you said, zig when you should have zagged.
Yeah, you've got to be in a situation where you've got a reason for doing what you're doing, as opposed to actually being driven or herded into something. I think, Troy, when in anything in life, if you deviate from what your goal is, if you don't stay on task with what your goal is, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and that's why we talk about the different buckets of money and we tie those different buckets to different expenses or different time periods throughout retirement. That gives us a plan, something that we can stick to even when markets get rough.
Yeah, and let's use this point in the show to bring up the value of diversification too, because what has made 2022 so challenging for investors has, in my mind, not necessarily been the equity side. We do expect market volatility. It's been the bond side, which the bonds are where we tend to think is going to be the lower volatility. It's going to be the safer side of a diversified portfolio. Traditionally, a diversified portfolio, those are the only two asset classes that have been utilized, stocks and bonds. Well, what happens if that's all you're in and you are down worse than you've been down since the 1970s for a 60-40 portfolio? That's what the data says. But those aren't the only two asset classes to provide income.
Well, there's that, and let's talk about the bond market for just a second,
Sure.
because historically, when you have seen negative returns in the bond market, and we have been here before, much to the chagrin of those on TV that say we've never been here before, we have been here before. 1994, we saw negative returns in the bond market because interest rates went up. There is this inverse relationship between rates and the price of a bond portfolio. But as time goes on, what you see is that those bonds get reinvested at higher rates, and those higher rates begin to add back into that portfolio. So again, not reacting to something that happens in the short term, but allowing it to play out is a benefit to you. And that's what we think we will see in the bond market. We're already beginning to see bonds kind of correct themselves from a downturn that they had. Bonds are coming back. And I think that that's something that as time goes on, we'll continue to see that play out. So I would not jettison your bond portfolio just because it lost money. It had a characteristic that you didn't expect,
Right.
But play on through that and be sure that you see that to its ultimate fruition.
Yeah.
Well, what Scott was saying a minute ago is, people, especially people that are in retirement, may think that they are well diversified if they have a mix between stocks and bonds. That's not the only two asset classes that are out there that you can invest in. There's real estate. There's products that could give you guaranteed income if you need that. There's a lot out there that you can invest in. And so we don't want to just think of diversification as a 60-40 portfolio of stocks and bonds. Right now, stocks and bonds are both down. There are other investments out there that are not down at this point.
Yeah.
And the strategy based of Gen Wealth's Ready to Retire process is that when it comes to your gotta have it money, as I like to call it, your required income, we basically isolate that income from any real market volatility and the chance of it being interrupted by a market volatile situation like we have right now. So when you think about that required income stream that you've got coming in to cover your basic living expenses, then what you're really, talking about and debating over is your discretionary income. Yeah. If your plan is structured properly, if you're depending on the grocery money invested in the stock market, that's where you really run into a problem.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of shows ago, John, too, even if you stay focused on the income and it's not about the investments, a true diversified portfolio even includes Social Security here, right? Because we talked about the huge inflation-adjusted raise that Social Security recipients received this year and are going to receive again next year. So all of those components from your income perspective can actually make things okay when certain buckets are not.
Yeah, and I think that oftentimes you just have to let things play themselves out.
Yeah, right.
I think that it's really easy in this day and time to get scared by what you hear in the media, by what somebody tells you at the water cooler, what somebody heard was about to happen, or whatever the case may be. But when you step back and take an assessment of what's going on and how you can handle that situation, much like John McClane did, as he kind of learned what was happening. Obviously there was the initial shock. His wife was in Nakatomi Plaza or whatever it was called, and he was like panicked about what was happening with his wife and all of that. But as he assessed the situation, he found a way to overcome this band of terrorists that were trying to steal the bearer bonds.
John and Sergeant Al Powell had warned Deputy Police Chief Dwayne T. Robinson his actions were ill-advised. They told him there was a better approach to dealing with the terrorist threat, but the Deputy Police Chief wouldn't listen to their wise counsel. And he had a man. And he had a man on the inside. By the way, there was a guy in the building. Right, John McClane was in the building. Instead, he chose to move forward with his plan from the outside. His plan ended up with police officers being shot and a police tank being hit by 2 rockets. So, what's the takeaway there? Listen to wise counsel. Someone who's looking at it every day. You talk about the inside. We're looking at the markets and planning for our clients every day. Advisors should be doing that for their clients.
And they should be using a strategy.
Yeah.
We've said this before, but I think it bears repeating that if all you have are investments, then you only have half of the equation. You've got to have that plan to go along with it.
It's just like we talked about with Social Security a minute ago. If you're only focused on investments, well, most people don't view Social Security as an investment. So if that never gets factored into your plan, that can make a huge difference. I mean, we've seen where Social Security claiming strategies can make a couple $100,000 worth of difference over someone's retirement time period. So it really is about looking at the full plan altogether and then coming up with the best strategy.
And Scott, speaking of Social Security, you referenced this, but I want to emphasize this. We're going to be somewhere between a 9 and 10% increase in Social Security income. That's going to go a long way for our clients who are Social Security retirement age. It's going to take a lot of the pressure off of their withdrawals that they're having to take from their investment portfolios, and it couldn't come at a better time. And that will likely, come around at the first of the year once all the final numbers on inflation are tallied up, because that's how the Social Security Administration actually makes those decisions. And so we're going to see that as time goes on.
Well, when you think about all these blockbuster movies, we've been talking about Die Hard today and lessons we can glean from them. And last week it was Top Gun. And in any action movie especially, you've got the protagonist, you've got the main character, and they're faced with adversity. Let's face it, that's what it is in every movie. We love a story, and that's the way the story plays out.
Oh, yeah.
We've got our hero. He or she gets faced with adversity, and they've got to work through problems. And what keeps them level-headed is their commitment to their plan, that their plan, the end result that they want, the outcome they want, is worth the sacrifice. And that outcome for clients, for investment clients, is income.
It always is income. It always boils back to income. Income is the outcome of your plan if you're in retirement.
So if you stay focused on making an income plan, you can ride out the storms of 2022 and beyond. There was the final bell, so it's time for our final thoughts, and Troy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the get-rich-quick scheme deal that we were talking about early in the show. I think that these are the times when people are most exposed to that type of deal. And really, what you really need to do is not fall for something like that. You need to stick to the plan that you've already had put together for you.
I think, again, you got to think about staying focused on your goals and listening to wise counsel. Wise counsel gives you that guy inside the building, as we've talked about on the show Die Hard. If you've got that guy inside the building that can give you the information that's going on so that you can make wise decisions, then you can go forward with some strategy that makes sense. If you're simply being, kind of whipsawed around by whatever the media is telling you, then you're really going to end up in a not so great situation.
Well, my final thought is the outcome is income. We've said that a couple of times during the broadcast today. What does that mean? It means your plan is about providing you income from your assets one day when you reach retirement. So what are your chances of a successful retirement? How do you know? You can get started by finding out for free. All you have to do is visit our website, 15minuteretirement.com. Use the numbers 1 and 5 and then spell out minute retirement, 15minuteretirement.com. Or even an easier way, you can simply text the word checkup to this number, 501-381-5228. Again, it's 501-381-5228. Text the word checkup and get your free 15-minute retirement checkup. It's a free assessment available to you. You can do that anytime. And that's all the time we have for this week's show. We thank you for watching and listening to the Get Ready for the Future show. Our At the Movies summer special series continues again next week. We hope you'll join us.
The Gen Wealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Finance.